I do want to go back to this other subject, immigration and the rather confused policies that we have. Joining me now is Dr. Lenihan, a journalist and researcher. The Prime Minister's told Parliament that the UK won't accept the return of these asylum seekers who've gone to Ireland to come back, as Gemma told us before. This has led to some trouble there. But the question is, what's the right thing to do? Is this just a rod we created for our own back? Thanks for joining us on the show, Dr. Lenihan.
Pleasure.
What's your reaction to Ireland's response to the influx of migrants from the UK?
I think the Irish government at the moment are trying their best to put on a brave face, but it's been quite humiliating, let's be honest. We've seen that the Conservative government there are celebrating, quite rightly. They've handled it more skillfully, certainly, than the Irish government have. Over the weekend, the images that were at the top of the Daily Mail of this tent city on Mount Street outside the International Protection Office in Dublin was a humiliation for our government and an embarrassment for the nation. And that sparked a pretty ham-fisted cleanup operation yesterday. So this isn't the first time that this tent city has been here outside of the International Protection Office. Last St. Patrick's Day, they also cleared this away in an attempt to make the city more palatable for visitors to the capital. Our Minister for Justice, Helen McEntee, said this week that 91% of migrants or refugees are now crossing over the border from Northern Ireland here. And it's clear they don't have a plan, and they certainly do not have the will to deport or set up a system much like what you have now enacted there, a Rwanda system. We're still reliant on self-deportation, and that's quite clearly just, let's be honest, a little naive. Rishi Sunak has figured that out. Let's be honest, a lot of economic migrants posing as refugees have figured that out. And right now, the biggest issue and what's going to lead to massive problems here in Ireland is that they cleared this encampment yesterday. 100 of the migrants went out to Crookslinch, which is a converted old folks' home, essentially. Another 186 were pushed out to City West Hotel, which is a massive facility. It's a 764-bedroom hotel, which is being leased by the government. And but more importantly, 60 more were pushed out to Newtown Mount Kennedy from Crookslinch to make way for these new migrants. Now, if you remember last week, there were these horrific scenes coming out of Ireland where the riot police clashed with locals. That's Newtown Mount Kennedy, where they've now pushed the overflow from this problem. And this is a real fear. There's all across small communities, people are afraid, well, now with this massive new wave, where are all these people going to go? And is it going to be my community next?
There's a couple of problems here. The Good Friday Agreement, which I was actually involved in setting up, means there can't really be a border between the North and the South. So there can't be a border between the UK and Europe, because obviously Ireland's in the European Union. So we end up in this ironic situation where migrants who are essentially leaving the European Union are now going back to the European Union. And the second problem is, maybe it's not so much ironic as problematic, that you can't really put a border between North and South, because then the unintended consequence will be stress on the Good Friday Agreement. I have to say I'm a bit more sympathetic to the Irish government than you are, because I can't really see what they can do.
I think the issue is that you're correct, of course, that that if they were to put a hard border, let's say, in the sea between Northern Ireland and Britain, as one of the alternative parties actually suggested this week, into, obviously the unionist community are going to be incredibly upset by this. It's just not a runner. It's, as you said, by the terms laid out in the Good Friday Agreement, that's just not a runner. But the reason a lot of people, myself included, and I think it is interesting that over there on your side in the media, they have been much more sympathetic to our government than, say, a lot of people here. It's because it's gross incompetence compounded over years. It's not simply just this moment. This has been a feature of this government since they took power. Since they took power, they've been relying on a self-deportation scheme, which is just not good enough. Last year, we had this is an agreement. You mentioned our EU, how this is an EU problem. I can tell you what a disaster that is. Last year, once agreements were struck with other European nations to return migrants to a safe third country, only 3 were deported. It's insanity. 3.
Not 300 or 3,000. 3.
3. And the year before that, 2. So this government is, they're in the pocket of the NGO sector. There's this kind of toxic empathy, I would say, which doesn't actually help at the end of the day, because you're opening up, as I said, communities are living in fear of, is the government going to be coming to our town with buses of it's always males. Actually, all of the people who were moved out of Dublin yesterday were young males. They're unvetted. We don't know when they're coming. We don't know who they are. And as we've seen, there's been more than 23 proposed migrant shelters that have caught fire since the end of last November, meaning there's huge tension here. It's a pressure cooker, and they're just not taking the steps necessary to diffuse this. I think what's happening too is they're trying to push a lot of the blame right now onto the British government, the blame the old enemy here for their own incompetence. So I think you're being quite generous letting them off the hook.
In which case, if you've defined the problem and they can do better, what would be your advice to the Taoiseach, to the head of the Irish government? What should he do?
Well, they have to be smart here, with an eye on the future, with an eye to the trickle-down effects, as I mentioned. They just have to implement the laws that already exist. You have to stop with this nonsense of self-deportation. Who on earth is going to self-deport ever? It's so sick. Just, there is no virtue. There is no virtue. And you, in having this softly approach to migration. You have to have, they like to say firm but fair. Right now, it's very fair, no firmness. Just impose the laws that already exist. And when a deportation order has been handed down, as hundreds have, you have to take the step, as the government has to be proactive in deporting. Simple as that. Then you're going to start on the road that you there in the UK have with your Rwanda system, which is that it's less about how many you deport, it's more about an effective deterrent. And that's why your system there, I know you might be loath, or many will be loath to give Rishi Sunak credit there, but it was very clever. It's a clever deterrent. And that's what we do not have. We have only pull factors and no deterrents.
Thank you very much indeed, Dr. Eoin Lenihan. I'm sure you'll get people talking, viewers chatting at tntradio.live. Really appreciate your time. We'll get you back as well to see how this develops.